Thank you for joining our Programa training webinar. My name's Lexie. If you haven't met me before or joined one of our previous webinars, welcome. This is going to be a little bit different than the style of webinar that we have done in the past. So this one is going to be whether you're brand new to Programa or you've been with us for a couple of years, we are going to be deep diving into all different aspects of our tool set. So today we're going to be specifically focusing in on schedules, specification, and client dashboard sharing. Now, if you do have any questions as we're deep diving into the platform, feel free to pop them into the live chat. We do have Mariana and Gail in the call with me as well to help out and answer your questions as we're going along. And then we'll leave some time at the very end to do a bit of a Q&A as well. And we're going to pop up a poll at the very end of this call just to get your feedback on what training session you would like to join next. Alrighty, so I'm going to share my screen and we'll dive right into it. Alrighty, so like I said, this webinar is for people who have been with Programa for a long time or you are brand new. So we're going to start with the basics of just kind of how to start a schedule, start a project, download your web clipper, and how to actually get products into your product specification sheets. Then we're going to go through some other different ways of how you can actually set up your schedules that might not necessarily just be product-based, whether you want to set up a budget or a client proposal before you're actually ready to start specifying into that project. And I'm going to show you a sneak peek of our brand new web clipper that just went live this week, which is really exciting. If you haven't seen it yet, definitely download that. It's like the URL scraper and the web clipper in one, so it's pretty magical. I'll demo that in a second. So then we're going to go through a couple different schedule options. We'll go through, like I said, deep diving. So all of the fancy buttons that are included in the schedules. And then lastly, we'll go through how to actually share all of these items with your clients and a bit on the financial components of the schedules as well. Now, if you have any burning questions, like I said, pop them into that chat. And if there isn't anything that is not necessarily schedule specific, you can always ask your questions and we'll try and get back to them if we have time. Okay, so starting with basics, when we log into Programa, first thing you're going to do, if you haven't started a project already, you're going to create a project in the top right-hand corner. Okay, so I'm just going to set up an example project here for, say, a residential. Pop in my address. Shout out to any Torontonians in the call. You can always set your tax preferences, currency, and measurement system all at project level. So for this instance, I'm going to set my tax rates to be tax exclusive. If you are based in the UK, Australia, recommend having them as tax inclusive. So you have both options. Generally speaking, it's typically how it works. Now, once you're ready to go, we'll hit add. That will add a new project to your main page. Now, if I go into my project, you'll notice that you have an untitled schedule and an untitled pin board. We're going to skip over pin boards today for, like I said, the basis of we're focusing on schedules. So in your schedule, it'll start blank like this. So number one being, we're going to use our three dots in the top right-hand corner. I refer to this as my magic button. So this is how you rename the schedule. This is where we export from, create purchase orders, duplicate all the good things. If there's anything you need to action within the schedule, it's probably within those three dots. So rename. I'm going to start mine as a fittings and fixtures schedule. Now, again, this is kind of dependent on the type of project you're working on, right? Sometimes we're doing a full new construction and we're specifying everything from tiles, paint, doors, windows, the works, or sometimes we're just doing a styling project, right? So it kind of depends on the project, on how you would actually set up these schedules, and I'll show you some different options in a second. But you can either set these up by room or by product type. So we like to refer to Programa as a opinionated software, you could say. So we've templated it to a certain extent of how we generally how the spec sheets are typically set out, but they are customizable to a so how you actually like to set them up. Okay, so number one being hit this download web clipper button if you haven't already. This is going to change your life. Um, so we're just going to add it to Chrome. So it's actually a Google Chrome extension. And once you add it, it'll live up in your toolbar here. So it looks like this little puzzle piece button. Probably can't see what I'm sharing, but it does have a drop-down menu. And so once you add it, it will live up in your toolbar. So add that in and then demo that in a second once I actually go into the products. If you have any troubles with getting that into your browser, please ask the girls in the live chat. Now, once we have our web clipper added, we're going to do blank product, and everything's broken up into sections. So this is where I was saying you're either going to set it up by product type or by room. So I just keep hitting new section, new section, new section, and I like to refer to this as the bones of my schedule. So you're either going to do kitchen, bathroom, or I'll do, say, plumbing, lighting, more general. Now, once these sections are built out, a question I get all the time is, can you do a flip-flop? So say I do it by room and I want to filter by product type, or I do it by product type and I want to filter by room. The answer is yes. Again, I'll show you on one in a second once I have it more filled out. But essentially, see how when you hover over the product, you get all of these pop-up buttons. So this is how we actually get products into the schedule. So there is the product from library. So that's the Programa product library that you would build out as a team or on your own. I like to refer to it as the frequently specified library. So it's items that I would use over and over again. So whether you want to web clip into that product library, save things for later, or you finish a project, you can also pull everything into the product library. So for example, I hit that product from library. It knows that I was in a kitchen section. So it actually gave me options of what I might spec in a kitchen. So pretend I already pulled in a sink. It fills in all that spec data for me. If you need to edit it, say I'm going to do black instead of Chrome, you can edit it in the schedule and it's not going to affect what's in your product library. So it becomes its own entity once it's actually in the project. So that's one way to get items in here. The next is custom product. So that's just blank templated item. So these three sections here are custom fields. So there isn't actually a templated name underneath, okay? Now, how I like to think of this when I'm filling it out is product name would be what I call it its proper name of like what it would be on the website. So let's pretend it's Whisper White. And product description is what I would call it as the designer. So this would be wall paint. Now, product details is typically where I put the location of where that product is going. So I already did it by location there. But say an instance of where you were doing it by product type, I would list kitchen. Or I mean, within regards to wall paint, it would probably be throughout. Whatever you want to write there. And then doc code would be your codes that are linking up to your documentation drawings. So anything you're putting onto your elevations. So that's how I like to list it out. Now, if we're going to be pulling products from the web, there's two different ways to do this. So this fancy button here is add from URL. So as it sounds, you're going to go on to a website. So I have this nice coffee table here. You can copy the link, paste it in. So that one is an AI tool. So it's pulling what it sees from the web, right? So some of them are going to be more detailed than others, depends on how much information is actually listed on that web page. So it'll take about 15, 30 seconds to fill out. Voila. We have product details, product name, all my measurements, etc. If I hit this details tray, you'll see it pulled multiple pictures for me, which we love. Now, if you're wondering about images, you can have up to 4 different pictures for every single product. If I want to change the main picture, you can star it. So that's going to make that the heading picture. A little fun fact as well, when you're doing furniture or I'll show you a couple examples, but say I'm doing like a custom sofa and I have a fabric swatch in here. See how there's an inset button? You can actually inset the fabric swatch on top of that product. So you can see the image of the product and then whatever color you're specifying it as, which is kind of cool. Yeah. In this handy details tray is all the custom spec details for a specific product. So if you wanted to edit anything, you can fill it out. The supplier detail, custom spec notes, important information, notes, etc. And on the image, if I want to be really detailed, if I click it, there's a handy little background remover. So if I want that to be nice and clean, just hit remove background. And again, voila, nice and clean. Save. So you can quickly clean up that section. Now, of course, you might not have a coffee table in the kitchen, but this is all for example's sake, okay? Now, I'll show you the web clipper. So this is brand new, which I'm really excited about. Well, the web clipper itself isn't brand new, but the new aspect of it. So again, you're going to go on to a web page. So I'm on Casson here. I'm on a different tab of this product. I want this shower head. We're going to click our little logo in the top right-hand corner and see on the web clipper how there's this drop-down menu. So it's going to always default to clip to schedule. So that's adding a product to a specific project. If I hit this, you can also clip to the product library. So you have both options. If you want to save everything to the library or you're sourcing, you come across something cool, save it for later, you can pop it in there. Okay. Now, in the past, what you still can do is highlight the information and this black box will pop up and you can click it. Now we have this smart fill. So if you hit that, similar to the URL scraper, it's going to scrape the website and pull all that data over. So it's going to pull my images, pricing, details, color, SKU, nearly everything, which is like still blows my mind. So I usually just add the quantity in because it obviously doesn't know how many you want. And the nice thing about it, if it did miss anything, instead of having to bop back and forth with the URL scraper, if it missed anything, you can just fill it out right here. Like, this is my ensuite shower. Boom. And other fun thing, these pesky, well, I shouldn't say pesky, they're important. The warranty guides, install sheets, all the extra kind of information we needed to pass along to the contractors. If you hit this plus button, there's an attachments section there. Hit the plus button, then click the PDF. It's going to save all of those documents to said product. So you don't have to re-download them, re-upload them, etc. Then we're going to go clip, choose whatever project we've set up, whichever schedule, and then whichever section. So that'll go green and you know you're good to go. Now, in the instance that you want to save the product to the product library too, you can always just go clip to product library and clip it again because you don't have to refill out the information, it'll save. So you can pop it into both places really quickly. Okay, we're all following along so far. I hope I can't see you, so I hope so. Great. Now we'll give that a little refresh. So that's kind of how to start with the basics, right? And I'm gonna go into a more filled out, fleshed out project now. It'll make more sense. So say you're now onboarding a new client. If I go in my Yorkville project here, there's a couple of different ways that we can manipulate these schedules to not just be product based. So I get a lot of questions about how can I make a client proposal? How can I make budgets? How can I put in my assumption costs versus what I'm actually spending on something? So there are kind of workarounds that we can do to calculate all of that information. Because like I said, you can manipulate the schedules to fill in the text to however you need them to be. So say we are doing a client fee proposal. What I've actually done here is I am quoting the job of what my fees are actually going to cost, or even if you need to quote out what labor costs might be. How I did this was just making different sections with design fees, and then under financial is estimating how much each phase of the project is going to cost. Again, you can set this up however you want it to be, and if you want to do it an hourly rate or just like a service fee. So all I did was add them as a custom product, and then you could type in design fee, for example, and then you're just putting it in the trade price box as, or retail box, doesn't really matter, of what that cost would be. So once you input those fees, you'll get these total costs at the top. So you could quote the job to the client, okay, after you've figured out estimates, okay, my total fee is going to be $54,000. And now you can either use this in the back end and not actually share it with the client, or you could export this to PDF, share it with them that way. If you want to get really fancy with it, in the details tray, say you're doing concept design, in the important information, you could list out everything that's included in your scope of work. So what's included in my concept design, what's included in design development, everything they're actually getting for the project could all be included in this notes section. And if you ever see me make a spelling mistake, no, you didn't, because it will happen. Okay, now see how I've marked them for client review? That is how you would get approval on things. So if you actually want to share it onto the client dashboard and get them to say yes or no, approve this cost, that's how you would do it. Again, I'm going to go over client dashboard at the very end, so I'll show you at the end. So that's one example of client proposal. Now, another proposal or budget that you might need to figure out before we actually start specifying anything specifically is I've made a budget based on a kitchen renovation, for example. So I made all these different sections about what I potentially would need to spec in the project based on past experience of, hey, these are all the items that I know I need. And I didn't actually spend the time specifying specific details, but I listed them all out. And then again, similar to the proposal, this is actually figuring out how much that job's going to cost in terms of renovation, okay? As opposed to my actual fees. So it can work both ways, whether you're doing this for furniture or you're doing this for a whole house or whatever you kind of need to figure out. It's all estimated. There's two ways to do this. I'm of the lazy type of designer, so I've just accumulated the whole estimate as one line item. If you want to be really granular, you could list out every single item, assumption cost, and then get your total price. So how I've done this is, again, kind of listed out everything I know I need to spec. So faucet, sink, different cabinetry options, lighting, appliances. And then just from eyeballing this or from experience, again, this is an example. Don't quote me on these costs. But what you could do is I just made one line item and then said that this was my appliance budget, and I allocated 15,000 to that. Okay, so that's what I've done to every single section. So I'll say 20 grand for lighting, 20 for cabinetry, etc. So you get the picture. So each section has its own total, and then total costs. So then I can go to the client and say, hey, my estimated cost for this whole project is going to be 87,000. So it's a kind of a quick way to do that math for you, again, before you actually start speccing anything. Make sense? Hopefully. Okie doke. Now, again, you can either share this with the client via PDF client dashboard or have it as your backend budget for you to just refer off of. Now, if this was your proposed budget and then you want to see, okay, what am I actually spending? You could duplicate the whole thing. So again, magic button, 3 dots, copy, and you're going to make a duplicate copy into the same project. Okay. And then from here, you could actually fill out when you're properly specifying, fill out on the proposed versus actuals, all of the individual items. Hopefully that makes sense. Basically, I would take the blank one and then start speccing into the duplicate copy. So then I have both that I can compare at the end. Okay. Now, one last thing I'll show you before we go into the spec schedules is another one for just expense tracking or quoting. If you're needing to compare quotes, you could do something for, again, tradespeople or just actual supplier quotes. You can utilize the schedules to kind of put in different line items to compare cost that way. Okay. So I'll show you an example of more of the nitty-gritty details of everything that you can input in here. Okay, so once we have built out the bones of our schedule, we have specified a couple items in using the URL, products from library, etc., everything we went over. In this details tray is where everything lives for that product. So down the bottom, because I showed you an empty one before, here's an example of custom spec notes that you can add in. So it's really great for lighting because there's so much minutia that goes into lighting, all the nitty-gritty details. So you can have up to 10 different custom specs, and this detail can be quite long. So you could put a whole paragraph of custom spec notes if you really wanted to. This is handy as well for tile. I'll put my grout color in there, or countertops, I'll put my edge profiling in there, all of just little things that need to be included that might not be on that main summary page. This is where you can really customize the data that's being inputted. Down the bottom here as well, you can see important information always exports out in red. So that's like, hey, this is really important. And then notes will also export out. Internal notes does not. So that's obviously internal. That's not shared. Okay. This button at the very bottom, download PDF, will give you something like this. So you can export out individual spec sheets of every single product with all of your information that you spent a lot of time filling out. And you can have multiple pictures on here too. So these export out in 10 seconds. And you can also do them in bulk, which is great. I'll show you that here. So 3 dots, you'll notice pattern, 3 dots. Export as PDF. And there's this handy button. Export with detailed product spec sheets. So if you checkmark that, it's going to send you everything. So you get one big summary document. So this guy, the full spec sheet with all of the products. Probably looks teeny tiny on your screen, but I promise it's legible if you print it. So it comes out really clean. You don't have to format any of your pictures. And it has all the pricing, etc. But it also sends you a binder of all of those individual spec sheets and all of the attachments. So all those warranty guides and things will send you a big zip folder. Be warned, if there's a lot of data in your schedule, it sometimes can take up to an hour to send to you. So just if you're clicking it a bunch of times, I promise it's coming. Sometimes it just takes a while. Now, I'm gonna have a sip of water because I'm doing a lot of talking. Okay. I get asked about revisions. So kind of one way to combat that is just putting your revision dates every time you export it out. So this will save is what I'm trying to say. Auto save once you add them in, and then they'll export out on the main page. So that's one way to kind of track your revisions. As well, it will export the date it was exported out. But if you just kind of want to track your version history, that's one way to do it. And while we're on the topic of exports, you can add your terms and conditions at the very end. So there is a way to do this where you don't have to type them in for every single export. They will automatically go. Which, let me guess, 3 dots, turn on terms and conditions. So that will export all of those out on the end of your document. Okay. One last thing on exporting. You'll notice all these toggles here. So you can turn certain things on and off. All of pricing URL would be the web link. If you don't want your clients to know where you're sourcing from, turn that off. Client price, RRP, is MSRP or retail price. Notes would be all of those notes I just showed you in red, important information, brand details. Just one thing to note, which I also get asked a lot, all of this information, product name, brand, color, width, etc., is all templated in one. So you can't necessarily pick and choose the certain options that are being turned off in that regard. Okay. Now, we're going to move into, let's do quoting. So say I have put in a bunch of different materials for pricing, and I actually want to send out a quote request to a vendor. That is 100% possible. So if you hit see how on the right-hand side, I have all these different people. So I have Perini, Benjamin Moore, etc. These are vendors that I've inputted into my schedule. So they're contacts. They're linked up to your address book, and everything's connected via email. You don't necessarily have to fill out everything, but an email does have to be in there. So what the quoting option is doing is just initiating that first point of contact from you as the designer to the vendor. So you can either do individual quotes, which would send it just to, say, Perini tiles, or you can do them in bulk, which ideally, that's going to save you a lot of time. If you want to get quotes on the same product from 2 different vendors to actually compare the pricing, what I typically do is duplicate it. And then I would put 2 different suppliers on each, and then you can kind of compare the pricing from there. So at the very, very top right-hand corner, you'll see this bulk quoting button. And this will list out all of the vendors. So it would pull all the products that have the same vendor associated to them, and then you can select them in bulk. So they obviously don't know that you're doing it in bulk. I usually just do a generic message. Okay. Can I get a quote for the following products, please? That will send them an email, and then it will also send them all the products that, again, are associated to their brand. So it's just initiating that contact to them. They can reply back to your quote request just via email. The pricing doesn't necessarily auto sync back into Programa. You're still responsible for putting that cost in there. Okay. And you have these handy statuses. We can mark them as quoting. These statuses are going to work with you through the entire project. So from specification, quoting, approvals, procurement, etc. Now, if I note over on the right-hand side here, it's this handy check mark box. This is how we action a specific group of products. So for example, I turn that on, see how the action button automatically pops up? So like I said, that's actioning a specific group. I can then do action, export as PDF. That's going to export just those 5 products from there. Or if I want to add these to my library, save them for later, I can do that in bulk too. So it'll move them all over. So I hit add product to library. It says, see, 5 products successfully added. Actually, you might not be able to see that notification. I think my face is covering it, but it does, it does show up. And what else was I going to show you? Action, bulk changes on statuses. So say I want to mark these all for client review. I can, or bulk change them all to be quoting. I'm in the quoting stage. That also works for if you want to copy a specific group of products into another project, because often happens too, especially with paint colors or toilets and things that I'd use over and over again. You can just, again, copy them. Move to section is moving it within the same schedule, or I can copy it into a new project. So you don't necessarily have to duplicate the entire thing. Okie dokie. Now, lastly, there's also 3 dots here. So there's a 3 dots on one specific product. You can do them one by one too. And you'll notice at the very, very top here, this is something I wanted to point out, is a flag. So when we were talking about revisions earlier, because Programa is a cloud-based software, everything is always being live updated. So if your contractors or your clients have those live links, meaning everything's going to change in real time. So we definitely want to flag something if it's been changed, right? So I typically will put respect. What's the date? I don't even know. 15th? We'll go with that. So I put the date on there, or you could use it for any notes. Say you're ordering something in USD. If I'm in Canada, I order something from the States, I could put a flag on this and be like, purchased. It doesn't have to just be for specification purpose, but anything that you want to flag with your team or for the contractors. I think in that case, that's what I use it for, is typically like, hey, I changed this. But that flag will export out on the live links and on your PDFs. So it's a really important note that way. Okay. Now, I know earlier I mentioned how you can filter between a product view and a room view. That is done via product details or product description, depending on which field you want to use. So remember at the beginning, I said product description, product details. Underneath is where I put the location. So I go filter by product details and then type whatever room. And then that gives me a list of everything in the kitchen of my material schedule. So then I could go check mark, action, export as PDF. That'll give me a document of everything in the kitchen. Easy peasy. And like I said, you can do it kind of vice versa. Then you can see here, everything for the kitchen, my total amount for the kitchen, 13,000. So that's one handy trick. I also love filtering by status, especially once I do approvals and procurement. It's really handy. You can basically filter and sort by anything on the schedule. So if you want to pull things to the top by doc code, you can do doc code. It's all alphabetical. So you just hit doc code, then you have to hit this arrow. That will pull everything to the top. And you can do sort within sections or just the entire schedule, as you can see here. And this has recently been updated. So now if you apply a filter or a sort, it will stay until we applied a sticky filter. So in the past, if you exited out it would remove my filter, but now it sticks. So that's nice and handy. And another thing, I'll show you. Let's do filter by, put that filter back on. Not a great example. I'll show you another one because I don't have much pricing in there. But all I wanted to show you was that essentially when you filter by a specific status now, it'll filter on the costing. So the reason this costing isn't coming up because it's under quoting, but yeah, that's another kind of fun feature. Now I'm going to go into another schedule. And we're going to go through financials. Okay. So under your summary view, you have all your different tabs at the very top. Okay. And then our financial tab. I like to say it's a plug and play system. So we're adding in the numbers and then all the formulas are already built in to the platform. So as you can see here, I have my retail price, trade discount, etc. So I'll do an example here. Oops, not 12, 1. There we go. We'll start with retail price. Let's say it's $1,000. Now from here, I can either put in a wholesale cost or I can just put a trade discount. So if I know I get 20%, that will then calculate my trade price for me, or I can do it vice versa. Doesn't really matter. And then your tax is calculated separately. If your schedule is set on exclusive tax, then tax is separated from that cost. Tax inclusive, tax is included in the cost. And again, that's set up on whichever tax rate you have associated to your schedule. So that's up to you as the designer to implement the correct state tax rate to wherever you're located. Okay. You can turn tax on and off at product level. So if I have a shipping cost, I'm not adding tax to it, it's included in my schedule, I can turn the tax off for that product. Okay. I'm going to turn it back on. Now, markups and client pricing. Now, this is a big question too. We're worried about sharing our trade price and all of that being visible. So if very, very top right-hand corner, it says add markup. If we turn that on, that's going to then generate a client price. So you can see it's created some extra fields for me. And so now I have a client price here. Your client price is being calculated off of what you have included in your trade price box. So if I'm adding a markup, it's not adding markup to retail cost, it's adding markup to your trade cost. Okay, so that's your unit cost plus markup, 20% say, is $960, and then your tax is separated. Okay, so we're not taxing markup. Now, then it calculates your profit there. Client savings, this is if you wanted to pass on part of your trade discount, say you don't necessarily mark up, you just pass on your discount, then that is what the savings is. So then say your client price is the same as your trade. Again, that back end pricing is still going to always be hidden. It would just show that your client has received a savings from you. Okay. Alrighty, now that's pricing. Hopefully that makes sense. And we have all your total costs at the very, very top. So you have your total client price, your total profit, tax, etc. And then these are all broken down as well. Now, another question that I receive quite often is how do we accommodate for shipping costs, freight fees, warehouse costs, all kind of the additional fees or procurement fees? There's different ways to do it. Our recommendation is to have a separate section for this. So I personally will do a whole separate section of my additional fees and charges. So whether I'm estimating this at the beginning of I'm going to allocate $5,000 for shipping, or I'm going to add it in after I've actually gotten my quote from the supplier, I've already purchased the item and then now I see how much the shipping cost is going to be, I added in a shipping line per supplier. If you don't want to do that, you can do one big bulk line item, but it would be the same way as adding a custom product. So you would add shipping fee in that way. Okay. And you can do it in one big separate section like I have here, or you could actually put it, say the rug, and then rug shipping cost. Okay. There's a couple different ways to do it, but in this example, we have examples of freight, install, maybe a labor fee, anything that might have to be added into that quote for the client to see or approve would be important to have into this schedule. And so similar to what I showed you at the beginning, you kind of add in and out what you need to show to the client. If you are trying to do returns or credit amounts, things like that, or you're doing a procurement phase, again, I create separate sections. You can actually do negative amounts in the schedule. So say you did return something or you're adding a credit and you need to kind of contrast that against your totals, you can do negative totals in the schedule. So that would minus the cost from the overall cost. In terms of hiding cost as well, another option is this hidden status. So hidden status is going to hide everything from your clients, and it also hides product from the overall total of your schedule. So whether you're doing something like this with component products, which I'll explain in a second, or if I'm working on a schedule, there's products inside my schedule that I don't want the client to see, but they have access to their dashboard, I mark them as hidden. So I can see it, they can't see it. Okay. Hidden will also not pull into purchase orders and will not pull into invoicing. Okay, that's something to note as well. Now, in terms of custom pieces, component products, kind of formulating all of that within the schedules, how we recommend doing it is creating a separate section. Now, there's kind of two ways to look at this as well. Is I like to do it this way because if I have fabric, for example, coming from a different supplier than where my fabricators, like the cost of who's actually building it for me, those are two different vendors. And I need to know, okay, my fabric is going to cost $1,000. It's coming from X supplier. That's why I do it as a separate line item. So I can actually keep track of all those costs. And maybe I need to see every single thing that's going into building this product, but the only thing I'd show to the client is the final line item. So when you're building this out, so I've already marked these as hidden. So that's not, these costs are no longer accumulating into the total price. But when I'm figuring it out, I'll have these as a draft. I'm just going to archive this for a sec. So I'm building out my custom piece. I'm going to add in all of the line items of all the components that are going into building that bed. So say, now I can see I have all the labor costs, everything that's going into making that product, right? My total cost for building this custom piece is going to be $4,500. Now what I'll do, again, I'm going to go back, action, change these statuses to hidden, custom product, and then I'll do custom bed. Total cost, $4,500, because it already did the math for me. So this is the item. So then I can add a picture in there. I can make it look pretty if I want to. And then you can always mark it up from there. So you're making your money. So that's one way to kind of combat component products. And then what we do is typically I'll link them with the codes. So either have it in the doc code section, or you could literally write in here, link to BD01. So all the codes will link up together that way. I'm just going to open my archive. So if you didn't see me do that, that's in the top right-hand corner, archive section. And that's how you can pull back products. So if you're working through that whole phase of kind of specifying things in and out, the archives are really great for that. So just going to pull back this bed. And archive from there. And then I would mark this for client review. So that's what they would approve. Now, if you want, see how in the custom spec notes, then I put those codes of each of the line items. So that fabric, that the labor cost, all of those components are then listed in the custom spec notes. So they're all linked together. Hope that makes sense. Okay, I'm conscious of time. So we're nearly through everything. I'm just going to show you how to share, and then we'll be good to go. Okay, so say we spec'd everything, we got our quotes, we got our pricing, we've set our markups, we're good to go. We're going to use that bulk status, action, client review. This is going to get us approvals, okay? Now, again, you can export to PDF or Excel, but what we really want to do is get in the habit of sharing and utilizing that client dashboard. So there are two ways to share. Publishing to web is going to give you an individual web link. Okay, or we're going to publish it to the client dashboard. So that's all done via email. So we just pop in client's email, hit add. Then you'll see it's kind of a fail-safe. You still have to turn on what they can see and who can approve items. So I'll turn these on. Again, pricing, if you have the markup turned on, they're just going to see that client price. You don't have to worry about the back end of that being shown. Okay. Now the publish to web link is also linked up to a QR code. So I typically like to send the individual links to my tradespeople, just because they typically don't need the entire dashboard. They just need what they're working on. So you can download QR codes of the specific schedule and either put these on site, scan it. It's all mobile friendly. That spec sheet will actually show up on your phone. If you want to do it right now, you can try it. It's all mobile friendly, like I said, so they can view all your specs, attachments, etc. So you can print these out or put them in your binder. So it's nice to have both the live version and the hard copies of everything. I'll give you a second if anyone actually wants to scan that. And this code will be live forever. Well, not forever, but you don't have to regenerate one every time you make a change. It will stay live as long as this green tab is on, then it's live. Okay. And it looks something like this. So it'll tell them when it was last updated. Those flags that I mentioned earlier, see how they come out in orange? So it's always going to be highlighted in the forefront. Within this details tray, they'll be able to see all of your important information, any attachments or custom spec notes that you might have added to each individual product. And this attachments button at the very top is handy if you want to actually attach your construction drawings, elevations, etc., to the specific spec sheet that it associates with, and you attach it all there. And that's all done. Top right-hand corner, attachments. You can upload documents there. Okay, and then if we go back to client dashboard, so pretend we've shared all of these files. Now we are on client-facing view. So they've opened up their dashboard. This is what they see. You can customize this header, etc. Anything you've marked for client review will then say feedback required on it. So they can click in. You can either set it to be in this grid mode, so it's a bit more visual for clients, or it can be in the summary mode. Again, they can read all the details. They can see multiple pictures. They can blow them up, make them bigger. Download the attachments. and approve or reject everything from here. I'd also recommend them going into the actual approval and feedback tab. This is essentially acting as your proposal. So you're putting forth different items. This is the total cost, or you could put different options. Sometimes I'll literally write option 1, option 2, option 3. And then they can approve, reject, and leave you comments. All from there. Everything, again, live updates. Back to, don't like this. Sorry, I can't talk and type at the same time. Filters back to your schedule. Voila. Other things to note on the dashboard is you can share any pin boards, so presentation boards, your Canva links, any external documents, and if you do invoice from the platform, then you can share all of their invoices onto here too. So that's kind of the next step, which we'll go through in another webinar. But essentially, once you get approval, everything filters back here. You'll notice all these statuses have updated, and you'll get a notification tab for approvals. So that'll go orange and it will pop up. So it doesn't exist unless they actually have approved it. Everything is date stamped and time stamped with your client's name. So you have version history of everything. Then from there, you can move into your procurement phase, or you can go on to issuing an invoice. Alrighty. So that is our deep dive into schedules. I'm going to leave it there for now, and I'll leave a couple minutes for any questions if we want to go over some. Gail, Mariana, anything that we wanted to dive into while we have a couple minutes left?
Hey everyone, can you listen to me, Lexie?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, great. We have a few questions for you.
Okay.
So first of all, can you explain what the doc codes are used for?
Yes. So doc codes are typically used, maybe not so much on furniture schedules, but typically, say on my, let's clear this filter, hold on. On my materials or plumbing schedules, these are codes that I would make as the designer, and then I code them to my elevations or my floor plans so that the builders actually know where all the products are going within the project. So say I have a tile, it's for the bathroom, I'll put ST01 on the elevation, and then they would read my spec schedule in conjunction with my documentation drawings.
Perfect, thank you. And the next one is if you could show how to sort items in schedule by room or by product type or using filtering too.
Yep, for sure. We can go over that again. So as mentioned earlier, see how on my product I have different rooms listed underneath? So you could list out as many as you need. From there, and at the very top right-hand corner, there's the filter button in the middle, and you get to choose what you're filtering the schedule by. So you could do filter by, then you type in the room that you want to see. So I say kitchen, which then filters that view to what I want to see. And you can filter it in the section or just get a list that way. You can also filter by status, which I like to do. So I could filter, okay, what's been approved. That'll give me a list that I can work through. Or you could also filter by a specific brand or vendor. So it's really just about choosing the filter and then typing in the thing that you want to see. So I could do tint, for example. The difference between filtering and sorting. So sorting is really just pulling things alphabetically to the top. So if you wanted to filter by, what's a good one? Like I did that's filtered by doc code earlier, or the details, that's going to pull it alphabetically. So say, it's another way you could kind of get a room view, I suppose, because it would pull all the bathrooms together. So filtering is actually showing you filtering down the specific products to only show you, say, 5 items, where sorting is going to show you everything, but it's pulling everything alphabetically to the top or bottom.
Perfect. Thank you. So our next question is if you can show where to add attachments to the client dashboard, for example, PDFs or presentations or floor plans.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll take it back to the very beginning. So from your projects page, when you hover over top of a project, see how there's a settings toggle here? In your project settings, there's a client dashboard tab at the very top. So then if I scroll down, there's a space for shared files. So that's where you would upload any PDFs or documents. So the 200 megabyte max on those files, but there's no file type restriction.
Perfect. That's great. And our last one is how we can export only specific sections or products in our schedule.
Sure. Yep. So I'll go back into my project. So you can use these check mark boxes on the left-hand side. So beside the actual header, if I hover over, see how there's a little box? You can do them one by one, or you can do them in bulk. So I could select a couple. And every time I select those boxes, that's where this action button pops up. So you're not going to export from the magic button, you're going to export from the action button. So actioning is always a specific group of items, and that only shows up if you've selected certain ones. So you can, like I said, highlight the whole section or one by one, then do action, export as PDF. So that will give me those 6 items as opposed to everything.
Great. Thank you. We have one last question for you.
Go for it.
So how will I know when a client has approved or commented on an item line?
So that would be in your schedule. So you'll have to double check. So this approvals tab will pop up here. So that approvals tab doesn't necessarily exist unless they have actually commented on anything, and it will go orange. So you can click in there, and then it will show all the comments from there. So it'll have these 2 tabs, so outstanding and history. Outstanding would be any products that you haven't reviewed yet. So marking it complete is just acknowledging that you've seen it, and then it moves to your history tab. So say I have to respec it, then I'll mark it complete. So that's one way. But notifications and notifications in general is something that we're working on currently. So stay tuned for updates there.
Great, that's awesome. And now I have a last question for you. So there are a few questions about quoting and invoicing. Is this a topic that we can do a full webinar on?
Yes, for sure. We're pretty much out of time today, but it is kind of a hefty conversation. So there is, we get a lot of comments and questions about quoting and invoicing. So we can definitely do a deep dive on that. Maybe in a couple weeks, either next week or the week after, something we'll talk about as a team. Was there one specific thing? Like we can do quoting. I can do one question on quoting because that's part of schedules if you want.
I think it's all good for now.
Okay.
That's just kind of a sneak peek for a future webinar.
Yes, exactly. You'll have to come back next week and we'll go over financials. Well, actually, we're going to do the poll. Did you do the poll yet?
Yes, everyone's already responding to it, but of course it's always good to share about it.
Great. Fantastic. Alrighty. Well, I think Mariana, any last questions that we want to go over before we let everybody go?
No, it's all good.
Okay, amazing. Thank you everybody for tuning in. I hope that was helpful. If you have any further questions, feel free to pop into live chat. We'll be online to answer any questions after this session. So thanks again. Have a great day.